This is GoPowerCat.com publisher Tim Fitzgerald. Thank you for listening to this PowerCat podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode of the PowerCat podcast by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, or your favorite podcast network. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a subscriber to GoPowerCat.com. We cover the Wildcats like no one else, with our VIP customers enjoying one-of-a-kind coverage from our team of professional journalists. And sign up today for an annual subscription to GPC and grab a 30% discount on your first year. And now here's the PowerCat Podcast.
The following is a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. You've discovered your link to GoPowerCat.com's PowerCat Sources podcast, presented by Blue Mark Energy, and it starts right now. Now, let's go to the WTC Gig-Powered Studios. Here's your host, GoPowerCat.com publisher, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the PowerCat Sources podcast, brought to you by Blue Mark Energy. If you have energy needs, natural gas, if you're a consumer of large amounts of natural gas, business, agriculture, schools, nursing homes, get a hold of Blue Mark Energy. Good people, K-State owned, out of Tulsa. Well, the Sources podcast is going to be mostly us talking to people about the game, about the program, and that's certainly what it'll be next week following Kansas State's game with Nicholls State. Well, this is the lead-up to that game, and we could put together a bunch of sound bites from this week's press conferences, or we could do something entirely different and kind of fun. The PowerChat has been, I believe, a really big success with our VIP subscribers at GoPowerCat.com. It is a hour-long interview session, split in two parts, so it's a little more consumable, with the headline makers, if you want to call them that, of Kansas State athletics. Chris Klieman, Eric Stonestreet, Joe Hall, Skylar Thompson. That was season 1.1, and there will be 4 of those mini-seasons per year. Another mini-season, 1.2, will drop late October, early November as we take a peek into basketball and touch on football some more. Then 2 more mini-seasons after the new year. 16 interviews, 32 episodes. It is original programming brought to you by Blue Mark Energy also, and it's the PowerChat. Well, today, even though that's behind the VIP paywall, if you want to watch the videos, get the whole feel for what the show's about, you have to subscribe, and I would recommend it. The PowerChat alone is something very unique to GoPowerCat. You're not going to find anything else like it in the marketplace, and we have some more tricks up our sleeve. In fact, on Monday, The Sample, our second original program, will debut at GoPowerCat. But, of course, we also have podcasts every day of the week through football season, and this is your Tuesday podcast. And today we go back to that first PowerChat we released on the website, the Chris Klieman PowerChat. His first football game as Kansas State's head coach arrives on Saturday. Kansas State against Nicholls State. We actually taped this PowerChat late July, right after Big 12 Media Days. But as you will find out, our PowerChats aren't a lot of X's and O's. We don't get into schemes and things like that we might do at GoPowerCat and other places. We talk to people about their lives. This is the first half of the Chris Klieman PowerChat. Welcome to another edition of the PowerChat. And as I mentioned earlier, Chris Klieman. Hopefully everyone recognizes you by now. I mean, what a whirlwind it's been since your hire. It's been nonstop.
It really has. I cannot believe we're at the end of July, and it seems like just yesterday we were 1st of January, and I don't know where the time has gone. But in the same respect, I'm excited to get things started here in August.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable 7 months. And we've got a lot of ground to cover today, but I want to go back to growing up in Waterloo, Iowa. That seems like about as an American upbringing as you could get.
Oh, it definitely was. Middle-class home. Mother was a teacher. Dad was a sporting goods salesman that was a football coach turned sporting goods salesman. And John Deere was huge in the heyday when I was growing up as a kid, and had factories and stuff around, and didn't live on a farm, but had a bunch of people that I was friends with in high school and grade school that lived on farms, and so it was a great upbringing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm also the son of a football coach turned something else to provide for a family, so I completely understand that. Columbus Catholic High School, your QB and defensive back. Looking back, were you the better high school QB or defensive back?
Well, we were at a school that was not the biggest of classifications, and so we had most of the guys play both ways. And I was fortunate that they gave me the ball as a freshman and said, learn how to play the position, and had some people help me out along the way. And I knew that wasn't going to be my position in college if I chose to play football. And probably about my sophomore year, I kind of realized that football was something that I wanted to continue on with, and I enjoyed competing no matter what position I was playing. And lo and behold, I got to play both ways. But knew at the end of the day in high school that defensive back was probably going to be my calling in college.
What does one do growing up in Waterloo?
Just like every other typical kid, had lots of parks around and played a lot of sandlot baseball, where you just find 10 guys and get teams of 5 and play, or go down to Burns Park and play some basketball, and just did every outdoor activity. I never had a phone in my hand, just like you. We never had phones, and I'd just somebody'd have to drive down to say, hey, maybe it's time to come home, or you grab a sandwich at noon and come back at 6 or 7 for dinner, and then go back out again. I loved it. I kind of miss those days of just going out and playing ball and enjoying yourself.
Back then, our parents would just, here's your bike, go, see you later, get out of my hair, go do your thing, don't eat lead paint.
That's exactly right, and that's everybody trusted you, and you just, as long as you made good decisions, you could keep that trust. And I was fortunate; I was surrounded by some good friends that just loved sports like I did, and so that's all we did all day long. And in the summers, you got to the end of July, and you're like, oh, I got to go back to school. We got to get a few more games in, and but I had a blast, and still stay in contact with a lot of the childhood friends and high school friends that played sports with.
You wrecked bikes. Like you said, you played a lot of sports. I think in some ways that's missing, and not just playing sports, but without adults. Without the parents there, without a coach there, just go and have fun and the joy of the game. Yeah. I think a lot of kids growing up now don't have that.
Yeah, and they're specializing, and I'm not a big specialization guy. I was around Carson Wentz, and he played, I think, 4 or 5 sports at Bismarck High School, and that wasn't that long ago, but that's what everybody did. You just played in the school that I was at. You had to play multiple sports. If not, we may not have enough to have full teams and JV teams and those things. And so no, I really enjoyed that. And you're right. There was very seldom did you have a ton of people at your sandlot event, and maybe a parent would come down to give everybody a little popsicle or something. That was about it.
Yep, you had to sort it out yourselves.
That's right.
Now, the first step of the serendipity of your hiring here was you met Bill Snyder at a football camp. Was that at an Iowa football camp?
It was. I was going into my junior year of high school, and it's difficult in the state of Iowa because I was a baseball player and I loved playing baseball, but the high school season is during the summer.
That's weird.
It's one of the few, I think there's maybe 2 states in the land that do it this way. So I left our baseball team for a few days, which I hated to do because I was always wanting to compete, but I wanted to go to the University of Iowa football camp. And Hayden Fry was in his heyday in the mid-'80s there, and boy, what a great staff, with the Stoops boys and McCarney and Alvarez and Coach Schneider. And
it's incredible.
Yeah, and so I went up there honestly on my own. Dad pulled up, dropped me off, said, I'll see you in 3 days, and that was that, and stayed in the residence hall there, and went to camp, and a lot of quarterbacks in line, but absolutely I was at the camp with Coach Schneider, and threw the ball around and had him evaluate me, and then I went to the defensive backs because I was doing both, and but it was just cool for me to be around all those great coaches that if I was going to stay in college and just be a college football player, I wanted to gain as much knowledge as I could. And you talk about a phenomenal staff, and it was really good back then. Now you look back and say, wow, look at all those things those guys did. But I was a Northeast Iowa guy, and of course we had Iowa and Iowa State in our state, but everybody in Northeast Iowa was a Hawkeye, and so I grew up really enjoying Iowa and had a blast at the camps.
And up in northern Iowa, how did that process break down?
Just hometown. Daryl Mudra was my college coach, and Daryl Mudra was nicknamed Dr. Victory, and coached from the press box. Not very many people know that. He coached every game from the press box, and so I had an opportunity to walk on at Iowa State, and Northern Iowa came in and offered me a scholarship, and my family needed those financial resources, and so chance to play close to home. Knew some of the guys that were on the team, had played against some guys, and then I thought they did a really good job building relationships and recruiting.
How long did it take you to realize I can play here, I can get this done?
Well, I was hopeful. I mean, like everybody, and I think that's the great thing about even kids today, the competitive side of things. I was hoping I could play early on. I mean, that was one of the goals I had. I didn't want a red shirt. I wanted to play right away. I didn't know how hard it was going to be, but I wanted to play right away. And I was on the third or fourth team the first couple weeks of fall camp, and we had a scrimmage, and I think I made some plays and did some good things. Next thing you know, a Monday before the first game of the season, I'm penciled in as a starting defensive back playing corner, which I knew I wasn't a corner, but because I just understood the game, I think, pretty well, and that was the spot that they were needing some young players. So I started at corner my first 6, 7, 8 games of my freshman year, and I felt like I could belong at that level. Some growing pains, obviously, like everybody has as a freshman, but I had reached one of my goals, which was to play early.
Did Chris Klieman have corner speed, even if it was 1AA level?
Yeah, exactly right. It was 1986 level or 87 level is what it would be, but no, absolutely not. I was trying to stay as deep as the deepest, but I always prided myself on being a really good tackler and knowing where we're supposed to fit. And I was glad about game 8 when they said, you know what, we're going to move you to free safety. And game 8, they moved me to free safety, and I stayed there the rest of my time.
That's nice. And of course, step 2 is serendipity, is you're on the '89 team. That was Bill Snyder's first home game as coach of the Wildcats. He'd opened on the road, but the Panthers come in and win 10-8. What do you remember of that game?
Not a ton.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
No, not. I mean, some guys can go play by play and stuff. I remember what a huge win was it for us, because we had lost the week before to a Division II team, and we thought we were going to have a pretty good team, and then all of a sudden, maybe we fell in love with ourselves and we go 0-1 and lose to a Division II team. Think, boy, we're in trouble. Well, we regrouped, and I think we ended up finishing 8-3 that year. But the win over Kansas State, just kind of just led us into a pretty good season. And it was our head coach Terry Allen's first game or first season as a head coach. So he lost in his first game, and then ends up going down to Manhattan and getting a win. But not a huge crowd, I remember. Not a big crowd, but it was still, to all of us, hey, we're getting a chance to play against a Big 8 team.
Yep.
You're getting a chance to play big-time football. And I think everybody has a chip on your shoulder when you have that opportunity, and our guys made the most of it.
It's interesting because it gives you a perspective that a lot of guys coming in from the outside may not have, that you saw what Bill Snyder started with and how far he had to go and how bad it was when he arrived. I've always told people, you pick the worst team in college in Power 5 football right now, and they'd beat those K-State teams in the late 80s by multiple touchdowns. That's how bad it was. So you have that perspective.
Yeah, it really was, and I didn't realize it then because we played in '86 and it was a worse team.
They were horrible.
When I was a true freshman, we came down here in '86 and we won. I think Stan was maybe the coach, and I know it was worse in '86 than it was in '89, and it wasn't much better. But you're right. I think that's what is so remarkable about the legacy, the story, the journey of people see what what it was in the 90s and the 2000s, how phenomenal it was, how far they had come, and it was best coaching job in college football history.
Stan Parrish is an intriguing character when you look at him as a coach. He's got the 1 AA ring from Marshall. I believe he's got a Super Bowl ring. He's got a college national championship ring, and yet at Kansas State he really struggled. And in fairness, there were zero resources to accomplish these things. Luckily, you don't have that problem. Coach Snyder changed everything. But when did you know, I want to coach? This is what I want to do?
Oh, probably through that 89 and 90 season, my junior and senior season. That it was something that I had a passion for. I knew I wasn't talented enough to play and in the NFL at the next level, and had a lot of injuries throughout college anyway. And I just said, well, I need to stay involved in this game in some respect. And so I know after the 90 season, which was my last year, I went to Coach Allen and said, hey, is there a spot left? Because I graduated in December. Is there a spot left? And and maybe be a volunteer or whatever. And he said, well, let's try to figure something out, because I think he saw something in me that I might be able to help. And I know he visited with Bob Bowlesby, who was the athletic director at the time. And Bob Bowlesby, who was friends of ours, family friends, my mother and his mother were dear friends, said, yeah, we're going to create another spot. I think there's something special in this kid that I think he could be a coach someday, and let's give him a start. And so Bob Bowlesby created another spot for me to become a graduate assistant.
Nice. No,
it's come full circle. Then last week at the Big 12 media day, that I give up Bob a big hug, and he just looks at me and he kind of shakes his head, because when I signed my national letter of intent in 1986 at Columbus, was when you could go out and have coaches, anybody could go out and have the letter of intent signed. And Bob Bowlesby was at Columbus High School with my parents and I signing our national letter of intent. And so Bob and I still get a chuckle out of that he was with me when I signed my national letter of intent, and he's with me on my first day as the Big 12 media day as the head coach.
What did Pop say when your dad, when he said, I'm going to go into coaching, and he's probably thinking, I've been there, done that. I imagine he was encouraging, but probably cautious.
He was, because he knew the passion that I'd had for it, and had I not, I'd probably been in sporting goods, because my brother's a national sales manager in the sporting goods business. My dad's was in the sporting goods business for a long time, so that was probably avenue B for me. But he wanted me to exhaust this avenue to say, okay, is this what you have a passion for it? I think it's something that if you continue to work at it, you have a chance to be pretty good at. And but it's I know how hard it is. I mean, I was a young coach not making any money, and then all of a sudden you get married, and all of a sudden you have a child, and you're still not making any money. It's difficult on a family.
And as a young coach, you go with Terry Allen to Kansas for a year. Mm-hmm. You got to feel like, oh, it's rolling now.
Well, yeah, I went from Northern Iowa as a graduate assistant to Western Illinois as my first full-time job, and went to Western Illinois and spent a few years there with Randy Ball. Then Terry left Northern Iowa, got the KU job, and invited me to come. And so, yeah, it's just kind of strange how everything, things happen for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I don't regret one of the decisions I made in coaching, and I bounced around a lot as a younger coach, but that's how I believe you build your network. You continue to learn more about yourself. You continue to challenge yourself, and that's what you have to do. I always tell the young coaches around that ask me, do as many things as you can, meet as many people as you can, go to the conventions, go sit at clinics. People think clinics are why would I want to go do that? You go and sit and you listen. You don't just go sit and drink beer with everybody. You go and listen and go up and introduce yourself to whoever spoke. And you just never know when you maybe trigger something with somebody. And it's all about networking in this business.
And you eventually end up at Loras College as a assistant coach, and you get 1 year as a head coach.
Yep.
What did you take away from that experience?
It was phenomenal in the fact that it was an hour and 15 minutes from my hometown in Waterloo, where I was at Dubuque, Iowa. The president there is still a good friend of mine today, Jim Collins, dear friend, and he offered me the head job, but I knew it was going to be hard. There's no scholarships in Division III, and at this was, 2005, and it was close to $35,000-$40,000 a year. And the recruiting was difficult. You were nonstop. It's very similar to what it is now, of being 365 24/7. You're just doing it without scholarships. But I was in charge of the equipment room. I was in charge of the field house where they played basketball games and setting up the field house. You did everything. And you were in charge, total charge of the travel budget and the financial aid and academics. You were everything, and you wore a lot of hats. But in the same respect, what a great learning curve it was for me to have all those things thrown on me as a relatively young person. But I really enjoyed that year. I loved the kids. Still communicate with a number of those guys. You talk about guys that play for the love of the game. That was what those guys did, and I had a blast with those guys. And but I also knew that ultimately I was going to get back to scholarship football and continue to try to make the climb.
And purple.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny. I was doing the research, and I'm like, well, UNI is purple, and then Loras is purple.
Yeah.
My father, Pat Fitzgerald, ironically, was from Casey, Illinois, and they were purple. Went to Evansville before Korea, purple. Came back from Korea, Northwestern, purple. So it's, but here you are, more purple. It's
right.
It's just, it's very strange. All the little things that have lined up for you to end up in this position. It really is pretty remarkable. You go back to Northern Iowa to coach defensive backs.
Yep.
And that, as reviewing your career, that kind of seems to me like when it started to click.
Yeah.
You go to Northern Iowa, you're there, 4 seasons or so? Who's coach at that point?
Mark Farley's the head coach at that time. Had some really good football teams. I went there in 2006. They'd played in the national championship game in 2005. Went there in 2006 and went as the defensive back coach because I wanted to get back into scholarship football, and Mark gave me that opportunity. I played with Mark at Northern Iowa, so I've known him for a long time. He was at KU, so I knew Mark for years and years. And then we had really good teams in 07, 08. We were the number 1 seed, I think, in 07, went undefeated. But, I was with, our defensive staff consisted of myself, Scott Frost, who's at Nebraska, Jerry Montgomery, who's the defensive line coach with the Green Bay Packers now. And we had a blast. And we were all young, but we were all having fun and had a great bunch of guys. And but I also was sitting in the same room with Frosty and Jerry, and I'm like, these guys aren't going to last here. They're not long to stay at Northern Iowa, as intelligent as those guys were, as well as how well they motivated guys and stuff. And slowly but surely, first Jerry left, then Frosty left, and then after the 2010 season, I was the defensive coordinator in co-DC in 7, and then DC in 8, 9, and 10. I just said I have to continue to grow, and I just felt myself being a little stagnant, and so somebody reached out to me from North Dakota State and asked if I had an interest in going to North Dakota State, and I'd heard so many things about North Dakota State from one, Daryl Mudra, who was my original coach in 86 and 87, was the first guy to win a national championship at North Dakota State in 1965. The defensive coordinator that I had at Northern Iowa in 89 and 90, Ardell Wiegand, was one of the best two-way players that North Dakota State had ever seen, and he lived up there. And so they both said, you're crazy if you don't take a chance at this. This is one of the most storied programs in the history of college football. Now, you go back and look at that and you say, okay, were they? Well, the amount of national championships as they had won at Division II era, they were just moving to the Division I area. Had only been there for a couple of years. And so I went and interviewed with Coach Bull and said, I'm going to take this chance.
It was almost like gut instinct, wasn't it?
It was because I was going from a defensive coordinator to a defensive back coach. But I'm not an ego guy. Sometimes you got to put your ego on the shelf. Sometimes you just got to say, how am I going to learn more? I mean, there's different ways to do things, whether it's offensively, defensively, philosophically. And it was just time for me. And that was one my dad encouraged me to. And I was living in the same town as my parents, and they had their grandkids and stuff. And my brother still lives there. And I just said, this is something I need to do professionally. And they both said, my brother and my dad, you got to go. You have to try this. And so I went there in 2011 and had a magical season. In our first season there, we won the national championship, and Scotty Hazelton was our defensive coordinator.
It strikes me, some by choice, choosing to go to Northern Iowa, and some by just fate or chance, that you've been surrounded by really good coaches the whole time. Looking back, being in the same room with guys who have gone on to great success, and a lot of good coaches don't go on to success. They know what they're doing, they just don't get that moment where they move up the ladder. How much does that impress upon you, some of the coaching qualities that you need to carry?
Really impresses upon me in the fact of I'm a be where your feet are guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at what's going to happen in 5 years. Where should I be at the next job? Where should I be? You just put your nose to the grindstone on a daily basis and learn as much as you can from the people that you're surrounded with, whether that's a head coach, whether that's an assistant coach, whether that's players, whatever it may be, and try to just gain as much knowledge, be a sponge as much as you can. And I think we all, Frost, myself, and Jerry, were all the same way. We all wanted to learn from each other because we all did it a different way. We all had different demeanors, we all had different ideas, but somehow it all came together. And so, I see both of them periodically, or communicate with both of them periodically, and we just kind of marvel about how young we were, but how much fun we had.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. You're D-backs coach 1 year, and then you're immediately defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're like, I've got a national championship, I'm back to defense coordinator.
Yeah.
You got to feel like you've made exactly the right decision at that point.
Absolutely, because you always, in the back of your mind, you want to think, gosh, did I make the right decision? Although when I did, I said, hey, I'm going to move forward. If I make a mistake, I make a mistake, but I'm going to go for it. And it did. I was at the end of that season. Coach Hayes got hired by USC. Coach Bull came in to me and said, I'm elevating you. No interview, I'm elevating you to defensive coordinator. Appreciated it. Loved everything you did. Our defense improved, and it's your show now. And so to me, it was kind of validated, okay, the move I made was the correct move, but we're just coming off a national championship. I better not fall in love with this move too much, because I'm going to be put to the fire. We need to be pretty dang successful, because we had a number of guys returning from the 2011 team that expectations were going to be high, but it's one of those things where you embrace that target on your back and embrace the expectations.
What was Greg Bull like to work for?
He was dynamite in the fact that Coach let you do your job. He was a real CEO, a guy that gave you suggestions, gave you enough leash to do what you needed to do, but you knew who was in charge. You knew he was going to make the final call, but never once did he question, why would you call this? Why would you do this? Just tell me originally why you're doing it. Great, we'll live with the results. And I so appreciate that about coaches. You never heard on a headset, you never heard at halftime or anything, well, should we do this more? Should we do this more? Chris, you've watched more video than I have. I trust your judgment. I trust you what you're doing on this, and let it go. And I really appreciated that with Coach.
The final step of serendipity came in 2013 when you guys come down here. K-State's coming off a Big 12 championship, a really good team. Colin Klein has finished up his career.
Thankfully.
Yeah, he was pretty good. Turned over to another good quarterback, but it was his first game.
Yep.
An Iowa kid, Jake Waters.
Yeah.
And North Dakota State comes in here in a really good football game and wins. And this wasn't winning, with all due respect to a team like Kansas or this was Bill Snyder had it going again.
Yeah.
And you guys come in here and win on a late drive. And I always said that. I said it at the time. I said it. You out Snydered Snyder that game.
Yeah.
You got the ball, drove the length of the field, ate up the clock, won the game. And Coach, I'm not sure Craig Bull's at Wyoming if he doesn't win that game.
Potentially.
And it set in motion everything that we've seen now. What do you remember of that win?
I remember spending the entire summer really dissecting Kansas State. We did it as a staff. I think Coach challenged us before we had our break in June and July. Make sure that you're spending some time on Kansas State. Let's make sure that we come up with game plans because we're going to have this this thing game plan before we start fall camp. And so I watch film constantly on their offense, and the players make offenses go. The scheme's phenomenal, but players make it go. And then we're watching film on Jake Waters at Iowa Western, and we're doing everything we can. And then we came back to work like July 15th, and we took 2 weeks as if we were playing K-State and had it all mapped out by August 1st of what we wanted to do, because we knew that we had one shot. And this was not like we had beaten Kansas, we had beaten Minnesota, we had beaten Colorado State, but this was a different this was a different team. This was a phenomenal football team that coming off a Big 12 championship, and I think maybe that was a dedication to the stadium that day.
It was.
And so then we went through fall camp, and each day at fall camp we'd spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes on Kansas State up until we got to about 2 weeks out, and then we had everything laid out for it, and we knew we needed to play close to a perfect game. We really did, but we also thought we were going to be a lot more physical than some of the teams that we'd seen on film. And even though I know that nobody was going to overlook us because we'd won 2 national championships in a row, there's still an FCS team that ultimately will wear them down.
Right.
And I think just the opposite happened. I think we ultimately wore Kansas State down in that game with, there's a number of guys on that team that we had in 2013 that was undefeated that are still playing in the league right now. There's good football players. Obviously, K-State had good players as well. And we got down, I think, by a couple scores, and nobody panicked. And that was probably I think the big thing is we got down 2 scores, nobody panicked. We all of a sudden got one of them back, and all of a sudden I think maybe the panic flipped to the other sideline a little bit. And next thing you know, we just methodically found a way. And it was the hottest game I've ever been involved in. And I didn't play. I was just on the sideline coaching my tail off, and I was drenched. And I can imagine how those kids were. And I'll never forget, our biggest thing at pregame meal was hot chicken noodle soup. Get the salt in you. The biggest thing at halftime was keep eating a little bit more hot chicken noodle soup to try to keep the sodium levels in you. This is 2013. We'd never used to that. We were playing in 70-degree weather or inside in the Fargo Dome, and never had any hot games like that. And just everything kind of came together that day, and our guys had a big chip on their shoulder.
Craig Bowl goes to Wyoming. How much of a process was it with you and Gene and the hiring?
It was a big process because Coach asked me to go as the defensive coordinator, and I said, yeah, I'll go, because I didn't know if I'd even have an opportunity at North Dakota State to stay. And then talking to people really close to me in my circle, as a couple days passed, and we knew Craig was going to take the job for a few days, and then it kind of came out and stuff, and as I was talking to people in my circle, they said, why don't you approach Gene about being the head coach? And I'm in the middle of playoff mode, so you're thinking more game plan and you're thinking all that stuff. And I sat home late one night and just said, you know what, I think I'm ready for this opportunity, but he's not coming to me, I need to go to him. And so I remember the next day I went and said, Gene, I know that you have a lot of good candidates for this job, but I'd be one that I think would be your best candidate, and I want to interview for the job. And we still were game planning for an option offense, which was terrible because we were game planning, getting all our option stuff ready. And then right after that game, he said, okay, I'll have you come over and interview after the game. And it was late one night, and stayed up an awful long time going through my thoughts and plans and vision for what I would be as a head coach. And I think it was like maybe a guess a week after Coach announced he was going to Wyoming that Gene announced my hire at North Dakota State, which was, everything was surreal, everything was great, but we still had a semifinal game to play, which everything comes back to this year as well as a championship game to play. And so probably that stressful stage of my life prepared me and helped me for this past year in another stressful time of trying to do right by the people that have given you the opportunity at North Dakota State, as well as do right by the people that have given you the opportunity at Kansas State.
4 seasons as head coach, right?
5 seasons.
5 seasons.
Yep.
A lot of rings.
Yeah, pretty fortunate.
And then Gene Taylor comes calling again. And we will get into that and his hiring at Kansas State right after this pause.
Stay locked in. The PowerCat podcast will be right back.
Is your January looking dry? Get some lotion. Get a humidifier. And better yet, get Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can compare prices across local stores to get the best price on a huge selection of drinks perfect for dry January. Every single time. Non-alcoholic wines? Have a look. Ready-made mocktails? Grab a straw and order 'em up. Beer without the alcohol? Yep, take your pick. You can find all of them here, in the app, in that phone that's in your hand. Could it be any simpler? Nope, not a chance. So shop for great deals on all your dry January beverages or other drinks and get them delivered to your door or blanket fort, maybe. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations. And don't forget to lotion up your elbows. They're looking a little dry.
My days working and taking care of my little ones can be a lot. I checked out care.com and it was so easy for me to find local, experienced, and background check sitters. Finding our babysitter was way more affordable than I thought.
Care.com makes it super easy. Search for qualified candidates. You can view their profiles, read reviews and ratings, check their availability, send messages directly, get the help that you need. Care.com should be every person's go-to.
We now send it back to Fitz in the WTC Gig-Powered Studios.
Welcome back to the Sources podcast. One half of that Chris Klieman Power Chat is behind you now, and here is the second half as we talk to Kansas State's new football coach in our WTC Gig-Powered Studios right here in downtown Manhattan. The video version is even better, of course. It's got pictures that go with it, and you need to subscribe to get all of our video Power Chats. But today we wanted to give you a little sample of what the Power Chat is like with this audio version of the Chris Klieman Power Chat. We continue now with part two.
Well, welcome back to the Power Chat here in the Go PowerCat Studios, the WTC Gig Powered Studios, and we're with Kansas State football coach Chris Klieman. Long first half of the chat, though. We got you all the way up to the hiring process, and again, you're in the playoffs, preparing your own team for bigger things, and Gene Taylor has advanced through his career from North Dakota State to being a deputy AD at Iowa, and now at Kansas State, and he comes calling, but this wasn't as done as a lot of people assumed. This was a legitimate process that he kind of put you through the ringer on, didn't he?
Well, and I was glad he did, and I think that was the way that it was going to be and should have been, but I think it started with when Coach announced he was retiring. Everybody in North Dakota State still adores, loves Gene, and knew that he hired me. And so I think the speculation started pretty quickly. And I remember, I think that was on a Sunday. And then we had our team meeting on a Monday prior to the next playoff game. And I think it was a quarterfinal game. And I just told the guys, I said, guys, I'm going to be really transparent with you. Gene Taylor is the athletic director at Kansas State. Coach Snyder just retired. My name's going to get brought up, I believe. I don't know if I'll get an interview. I don't know what'll happen. But I just want you guys to be aware that my focus is going to be on us continuing this drive to win another national championship. But if he does call, I'm going to listen. And I talked to the leadership council, our captains, and they're like, Coach, you're crazy if you don't listen. It's a Big 12 job. You've put yourself in position to at least be considered for it, and we appreciate you letting us know. But we'll handle things. We had 24 seniors. We had a really good football team, but we understand, and I think that helped the process. And then I think Gene's people contacted our people, my people, a couple days before we played a playoff game and kind of set in motion a time for us to interview.
Is it a challenge to be invested in two different things like that at the same time?
Absolutely. Really challenging. It kind of goes against what my feelings are of be where your feet are. My feet were really with the North Dakota State kids, because that's what I knew, and that's where I had a job, and that's where my goal was to win another national championship with these guys. But I also had really good people surrounding me saying, you know, Coach, you can do both now. Do what you have to do, preparing every week or preparing each day for a practice, and then when you go home late at night, just put some of your thoughts down on paper so that you put your best foot forward when you have the opportunity to interview. But your resume can speak for itself too. You just need to expand upon it with the success we've had in how you're going to do this at the Power 5 level.
So Gene Taylor is running a high-profile coaching search at the FBS level. Did he bring you into Manhattan, or did you meet on neutral ground, or did you go to Fargo?
Yeah, we met on neutral ground, and it was, you know, we were trying to find a great place to meet, which was hard because I couldn't be away for more than 4 or 5 hours because we were practicing or meeting every day, and I never was going to not be around that football team in a practice. And somebody say, well, why isn't he here? And Gene knew that too. That was not going to be fair. And so, but the Fargo media is pretty persistent as well of trying to find out, is Gene coming to town, or are you leaving town? And so they had, you know, some jet centers staked out and stuff, and people around the office in the morning to see if I'd come in. It was kind of surreal, to be honest with you, that I'd come in the office and there'd be camera trucks and stuff like, okay, you arrived at work today and things. And so it was really interesting. And so we decided to meet at my house. And so we came over and met at my house, and met in the morning, and spent, I would say 3 hours, 4 hours, somewhere in there with Gene and Jill and Kenny, and kind of laid my vision and laid my plan out. And once I did that, they jumped in their car and headed out of town to where they flew out of, and I jumped in my car and went right back by noon or so to continue on getting ready for the next practice.
It's funny. We as members of media were doing the same thing down here, tracking where Gene's at and staking out the airport to see where he's flying to and from. And
really fascinates me how you guys are all in sync on this stuff. It really does, and I understand why, but it's just interesting how it is a big deal no matter where you're at. I mean, whether it's North Dakota State, Kansas State, any other Division I schools, how you guys want to be on top of making sure you don't miss a trick, and we're trying to slide around and see if we can beat the system a little bit.
My latest thing I attempted to use, and they outsmarted me or were very cautious, is if you have the Snapchat at, it's possible it will track you and your followers can see you. So I'm tracking the location of Ryan Lackey and Kenny Lanou as best I can, and every time I did it, they were at home. They were pretty good. So it's technology and flight aware and all of that is just a fascinating process. And it came down. It was a legitimate race. Kenny Lanou, Jill Shields, Gene Taylor sit down and talk about this, and Neil Brown is a very high-profile guy that is also in the running. I think he ended up as a perfect fit for him at West Virginia, and Gene makes the call. You're at practice. Now, I'm surprised you had your phone, but you probably had it because might be coming.
Well, I knew that somebody could be calling, whether it was my representation or I didn't know Gene was going to be calling and being live on air. That I did
That's
not know.
That's a whole new world.
That I did not know at all, and I think he caught me one time and said, "Coach, we're live right now." I'm like, okay, but no, I typically wouldn't have my phone at practice, but no, it was a pretty surreal moment, and it was early in practice because we were in finals week, so we didn't practice until really late that afternoon. So pretty cool moment.
I watch your language here. So did you tell the kids right away?
No, I waited till the end of practice. Yeah. There was a couple of players that I had spoken with probably right before meetings. One was Easton Stick, our quarterback, and one was Darius Shepard, two kids that actually visited us just recently here in Manhattan and said, guys, I think this is going to happen. And they both gave me a hug and were pretty excited for me. And I said, I'll know for sure by the end of the day. but I think it's going to happen. And so when I could share it with two guys that I recruited both of them, been around both of them for a long time, it was really close with them on a personal and professional relationship. That was pretty cool to share with those two.
And then how many days was it between that phone call and coming to Manhattan?
Well, I think I came the next day for a press conference, but once again, I know we had practice the next day, so I think that was maybe Monday. The days run together, and then Tuesday we had practice, and I flew out Tuesday night, but I was back by Wednesday at noon because we had practice Wednesday afternoon because, oh, by the way, we were just playing our biggest rival on Friday for the semifinals. That after all that stuff transpired, we could not lose that football game for a number of reasons.
No, that would have sucked.
That would have been bad. It would have been. I probably wouldn't have gotten out of Fargo alive had we lost that one. So.
And again, in the world that we live and how things have changed, you don't just get on a plane to come to Manhattan. The plane includes a photographer and a videographer, and so you're on camera the whole time. This was the social media hire.
Yeah, it really was. And I kind of anticipated it would be something like that. It was probably bigger than even I imagined, but Kenny and his crew did a phenomenal job. And it was really important for me to have my family, not just my wife, but my three children as well. And my son's in the middle of finals week and things, but it was really important to have my family along for that plane trip.
And that plane comes in and you see the stadium below. What were you thinking right then?
It was one of those surreal moments. You're kind of like, wow, this is really happening. And it was pretty neat, something I'll always remember.
So you go to the press conference, formality, the jersey and all that, but then you get to meet with the team.
Yep.
How did that go? I mean,
I thought it went well. I was just trying to be as real as I could with those guys. I knew it was going to be a short meeting. I knew some of those kids had finals. Some of them were done, but they were leaving that night or the next morning and getting out. So, and it was late when I met with them. Not even, maybe it was 10 o'clock or something. And so I just wanted to just kind of give them a quick synopsis of where I'd been and what my plan was and what our vision was together to keep this train moving. But I also shared with them, guys, I have to go back and finish a job, which I think is a unique thing. Fortunately, those guys were going home for some Christmas break. That they were okay with me. Okay, go finish your job with these guys. And a number of we've recruited Kansas City really well at North Dakota State. So a number of the Kansas City guys knew each other from both teams. I know there was phone calls and text messages and stuff back and forth. What are we getting ourselves into? To what's coach like? To whatever it may be. So, but it was a great first quick meeting. But I also knew I wasn't going to see most of these guys until middle of January because school started so late here for the second semester.
But you knew Skylar Thompson. You guys had recruited him. That had to be comforting to know not just who your quarterback was, but he fit what you wanted to do.
Yeah, we were one of his first offers, I know.
Right.
I'd visit with him on the phone one time in May when we had that opportunity to utilize a phone call and offered him a scholarship, and loved the way he played and loved the way he carried himself and all the things you look for intangibly with a quarterback. And I remember then maybe 3 or 4 weeks later or something, he called me back to say, Coach, I've decided to go to Kansas State. Totally understood, but it was neat to see how that came full circle.
You knew Skylar's game. You knew what he was about. How did he fit into that line of quarterbacks, the Carson Wentz, the Easton Stick? Did he kind of follow that ability to throw, ability to move a little bit?
Yeah, but we were still learning about him too. But from his high school tape that I recalled, yeah, he did. He fit into, not only the physical tools, but all the intangibles, and a tremendous athlete, and could do a number of things, and the fact that I think he had natural leadership qualities, and that's what we're all looking for, is not just the physical tools, but the intangibles and the mental capacity to handle the position of quarterback.
So you go back, you got South Dakota State, and then you make it to the finals with Eastern Washington. I would guess that those ratings are pretty good because every K-State fan tuned in to watch. And during all this, you're starting to try to put together a staff. And you started with Hank Jacobs, who came down with you and is, kind of your right-hand guy. His desk's right outside your office. What is it about Hank that you knew you wanted him there?
Simple, loyalty, and somebody that I think is up and coming in the profession. I hired him. He was a graduate assistant, a student assistant when I first got there in 2011, then moved to a graduate assistant role, and then was able to hire him as a part-time employee in like my first year in 2014, and then we were able to, he did such a good job that the administration at NDSU wanted to hire him full-time, and so then we kept putting on more responsibilities on him in 15, in 16, in 17, and in 18, and so he was with me through that whole time as a head coach. And you always want to have somebody with you that knows you, that knows, okay, coach is in a bad mood today, here's how to handle him, or coach is in a great mood, or I'm the one that has to share bad news with coach. He knows how to do those things with me, and I can vent on him, and he knows it's nothing personal at all, because I love Hank. Hank's been with me forever, and so that was a simple one for me, that I wanted to have somebody that, because we still had 3 weeks as well of a season, Hank, you need to help me do some things administratively on both ends, on the K-State end and on the North Dakota State end.
And putting together a coaching staff, a Division I, a Big 12 coaching staff. And you're on the clock. You got recruiting hanging out there. You got a lot of things going on. How daunting was that?
It was, but we had the first initial signing day the Wednesday after the South Dakota State game, and so we didn't have many people hired at that time, just a couple, and I remember going out with Taylor Bratt and with Colin Klein and Blake Seiler, and the three of us kind of went, or four of us went and saw as many kids as we could on a Saturday after the South Dakota State game, and then I was there through the signing period in Manhattan until we were able to sign some guys on that first Wednesday. And then after that is when I really started to focus, because we still had 2.5 weeks before a championship game, and I wanted to try to get a staff in place. And I knew a couple things. One, by that time, Matt Ince had been named the head coach at North Dakota State, who was our defensive coordinator there, and so I knew everybody was going to have a job. That was it was something you always worry about as a coach, is you're affecting families and children and stuff, and somebody was going to have a job, whether it was at North Dakota State, a great school, or coming to Kansas State. And there was a fit I had with a few guys, and for me it started with Coach Mess as the offensive coordinator, and all those things we go back and talk about with playing baseball when you're a young kid, and pick up basketball games and stuff. Coach Mess was involved in all those things, and was at Northern Iowa. He was my host on a recruiting trip because he's a year older than I am. And so he was the first one that was a natural for me, and he's had coordinating experience in the Big 12, and so Courtney was the first guy that I hired from a coaching staff perspective, and then Coach Riley followed closely behind, because I've been with Riles since 2013. I was with him both as an assistant, and loved the way he coaches offensive line, and then it just started falling together.
As a defensive coach, bringing the offensive guy, Coach Snyder was the opposite. He was the offensive guy, and always wanted, he'd let the defensive coaches kind of take their turn. Had a pretty good run of defensive coordinators here. So now you've defined what you're going to be on both sides of the ball. Mess is with you, and he's had Big 12 experience at Iowa State. So right there, you got to feel a little more stable. Like, I know what we're going to play. I know what we need to do, and there was some advantages here. You played that semifinal on that Friday. You can't come out on Saturday, and then you got that, what I think is kind of a strange break all the way to the championship game. It was, they almost treated it like a bowl game, which is cool, but it was kind of you go week, and then you got to pause, and you were able to use that to your advantage. You brought 4 guys from North Dakota State. What was it about those 4?
A number of things, just some of it was, Coach Riley, Coach Mess, Coach Klieman had been with me since since I started as head coach. Mess wasn't, but I'd known him forever. And then Jason Ray, who he's played in the Big 12.
Yeah.
He played at Mizzou, coached at Oklahoma State, and we had just hired him, and I was so impressed with Jason when we hired him that I knew if I had an opportunity I was going to bring Jason with me, because he's just such a great person and a great football coach and mentoring young men. And so those four guys just kind of fit some of the spots I was looking for. And you always have, just like every coach has, a short list of guys that you've worked with, you've been associated with, you've heard about, whatever it may be. And so then I just started attacking that short list after the four guys that I'd spent some time with at NDSU.
Colin Klein ends up being your only carryover, as Blake Sadler did end up going to West Virginia. Colin seems to kind of fit right in with his group, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does.
He's such a good guy to start with, but
Yep.
His style seems to slide right in.
Yeah, and Colin could fit in with anybody. He's that type of person. But when you walk in a room and Colin's there, the room lights up. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. He's got that infectious personality, tremendous man of faith, tremendous leader. What he did on the field, you can tell why he's successful as a coach, is because he puts his heart and soul into it, and challenges his players to be great on and off the field. And I was able to spend a few days on the road with Colin as kind of the lead recruiter. He and Taylor were, because I was selling my brand, but I wasn't selling Kansas State yet. I didn't know enough about the academic side of things, the facility side of things, all those things that those guys know so well. And so just being able to sit in a prospect's home and listen to Colin and listen to Taylor Bratt and listen to Blake Sadler talk about Kansas State, I learned a ton. But the passion that Colin showed about this institution that he loves so much really made it a no-brainer for me to offer him a job.
You put together a really good staff. I mean, you had the hiccup with Blake leaving. A defensive coordinator was in and out. Luckily, he didn't buy a house. But it kind of felt like it all just ended up where it was supposed to be. You end up back with Coach Hayes, Scotty Hazelton, who, by the way, looks like the Hollywood casting version of a defensive coordinator. And it's been great for the media, because we're getting some access to assistant coaches again, which Coach Snyder ended around 2004 or 5. This is a good group of guys. They're just good people.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it.
Really good people that, once again, I don't see anybody as being an ego guy. Everybody has their place. Everybody's been around the block. Our defensive staff, really seasoned guys that have been a lot of places, don't care who gets the credit. We all want to get the credit. We all are going to put equal amount of time in. We all are going to have a say. I've been in a room with Scotty, so I knew that was going to be a great fit, because he wants to know what everybody's opinion is. He's not the one that's going to say, I have all the answers. I want your opinion, and I want to lean on you guys for third down stuff, for run pressures, whatever it may be. And so, having Scotty lead it, and then having Joe come in, that I've been around, and I know how intelligent Joe is, and Joe really has a great, sharp mind for the passing game, and then to bring Van Malone in, and Van's one of the top technicians of corners that I know, that I've been familiar with Van. He was an NDSU guy years ago, and then we interviewed Tui down at the convention, and I'd not met Tui before, but I'd heard the name enough, and he was a blast to be around, and really brings a special quality to the table of a guy that really understands the defensive tackle position. And then when Blake left, we were able to hire Buddy Wyatt, and Buddy was on our list originally. Even when we interviewed Tui, Buddy was on our list, and so it made it really easy when Blake left to call Buddy and say, okay, you ready to come? You've got a job. And Buddy and Van have been with each other, and so the familiarity on that defensive side, even though that number of us came from different spots. I think everybody's on the same page, and that's what's fun is. And I bounce around from meeting room to meeting room. I don't just sit with the defensive guys as people may think. I love to go to the offensive meeting room and give a defensive coach's perspective in there. And so I really enjoy the camaraderie and the banter back and forth, and that's what you're looking for is great ideas on each side of the ball.
Getting ready for spring practice, got to learn who's what. You're probably watching some tape, and it's probably frantic. It's probably just, you get 15 practices, and you just kind of dive in with a new group. Can you learn much in that short a period of time?
Well, yeah, you learn a little bit about each other, and you're just trying to get to know the players, and you're wanting to instill your culture of how you want to practice. That's the biggest thing you want to do, as well as those players to learn how they're being coached. What kind of coach is Coach Riley? What kind of coach is Coach Klieman or Coach Hayes or Coach Anderson? That's what you're trying to figure out. And we're installing the basic stuff offensively and defensively, and that's the first 4 or 5 days it sometimes looked like football and sometimes it didn't look like football, and that's kind of what's to be expected. And then as it wound down in spring practice, I thought it started to look more and more like football every day, and guys started to feel more comfortable, and that's why we're so excited as we lead into fall practice, because we've just barely scratching the surface of what we're going to install, what the guys are going to pick up, what the guys are going to retain, and I look forward to a great August.
You start August 1st. You had Big 12 Media Days, as we mentioned at the top of the show, and that says football season, doesn't it? Here it is. It's ready to go. How eager are you to get these guys? As people watch this, you're on the field, but how eager are you to get them out there?
I'm really ready to get started. I know the guys are as well. They've had a really good summer with Coach Dawson and his staff training in this brutal heat we've had this summer. Now, once you get past the 4th of July, I think everybody thinks more season and less about just strength and conditioning. And so the guys are excited and chomping at the bit to continue to improve every day, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're so far away from a finished product, and I'm excited because I think we will continue to improve throughout the season, and what we see in mid-August is not going to be as good as what we see in mid-September, and then hopefully mid-October, and that's the sign of, I think, a team that's learning the culture and learning how we're doing things.
People emphasize the differences you have with your predecessors, and there are some. You're obviously all the social media is a perfect example of that. That just didn't happen. Your availability to do things such as this, that typically didn't happen. But there's a lot of similarities here that I don't think people fully appreciate. This talk of developing players that was so successful at North Dakota State, you got to go out and identify guys that you can get that are also going to be really good football players. And maybe there's, some pretty good overlap there, and maybe not. But it's all about seeing kids for what they will be and not what they are. That's an essential ingredient to be a coach at Kansas State, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, and it's really an essential ingredient to be a coach anywhere. You have to be able to develop talent, and you realize that you could get a young player in here that's just not matured yet. His body hasn't matured yet, and that's why you got to stay the course with those kids. And unfortunately, everybody wants to play as a true freshman, and there's not always going to happen. And you have to give those kids enough encouragement to keep driving and keep striving for their perfection or their perfect person, so that they keep working hard and that they see the light at the end of the tunnel. Because it may be their second year, sometimes it may be their third year before they play. But if you continue to give them positive feedback, positive reinforcement of this is the track that you're taking right now, and you're gonna have some success at the end of that. And then there's some kids that it just falls into place right away, and they play quickly, and that's. But even the kids that play right away, you're still developing those guys every week, every month, every year, so that you can continue to get the most out of those guys.
I'm not going to get into a bunch of position by position things, because as this appears on the website, that's going on with other forms of the media. But this running back situation is very intriguing, because it was kind of a convergence of things. You know, they lost a couple guys at graduation. Alex Barnes goes to the NFL. Another very good running back is lost career with injury. I've never heard of a program not having any scholarship running backs. That has to be like, oh crap! What are we doing here? What do we got to put together to string this together?
Yeah, it was a kind of a shock to me when I did learn that, but that's the hand we were dealt, and we went with the grad transfer route a little bit. One with James Gilbert, and he was here for spring ball, and then another with Jordan Brown that just arrived here shortly after the 4th of July, and those guys at least have had some playing time at the Division I level. I'm excited about some of the guys we have. Harry Trotter, Tyler Burns. We have some older guys that just haven't had their opportunity yet, and then we restocked it with freshmen too, because you can't have all upperclassmen, but you couldn't have all freshmen either. So we have a pretty good balance, and we have great competition, and that brings out the best in everybody when you have that competition. And if you've looked at the track record of what Coach Mess did at NDSU with the last 2 national championship teams, we played 3, 4, 5, 6 running backs, and I really believe that you need to have multiple guys, not only as a skill set of playing running back, but a lot of those guys are going to run down on kickoff and make a tackle too.
Well, we have a thing here at Go PowerCat we do on our podcast called the Overtime, and people started years ago. People started asking ridiculous questions, and if the moon was made of cheese, would you eat it? Those types of questions. So I'm going to put you on the overtime now.
Okay.
5 quick ones from a longtime poster at Go PowerCat, CFID.
Okay.
He doesn't spell it that way. That's how you pronounce it, Zach. It's CFID. I didn't know that. Coach Snyder was notorious for his late-night Taco Bell runs. What's your go-to meal or place on late night, leaving practice, got to get food?
I'm so fortunate. My wife is a phenomenal cook, so she typically will have something in the refrigerator for me. And I'm not a fussy eater, so I don't have any late night. I'm not a fast food guy, but whatever that we can find. Sometimes it's just a sandwich, and sometimes it's a leftover steak or leftover meatloaf or whatever it may be.
That's typically the way I am. Coach Jim Harbaugh at Michigan recently said he thinks players should have 1 free transfer to be eligible the next year. There's so much talk about this transfer thing, the senior transfers. Where do you stand on this?
With the grad transfers, I think they've fulfilled their time. They should be able to be eligible somewhere else. That shouldn't be changed. I think the people that enter the transfer portal, I think everybody should sit a year, and I don't think one exception compared to another exception, because we've seen it this year already. Some kids appeal it and don't get it, and have the same case as some kids that appeal and do get it. And I know that Coach Fitzgerald at Northwestern, I was on a committee with him last year and had a pretty good thought of, if you transfer and you lose that year of eligibility, if you graduate, we'll give you the year back. But I think everybody should sit a year.
I kind of agree. What is a person from Waterloo called? A Waterloon or a Waterloonian?
They're just from the Lou.
From the Lou?
From the Lou.
I like that. We got a bar called the Lou here in Manhattan. Have you ever been to the John Deere Factory and Engine Museum?
I've been to the factory, but never been to the museum. There's factories all over, but have not been to the museum.
I didn't. I see. I'm learning stuff here.
Okay.
I didn't even know that existed. You haven't been here a long time, but is there a favorite spot to go to on campus in someplace in Manhattan?
No. Once again, my wife and I are pretty simple people, and we stay at home and cook out an awful lot, and you can almost cook everything on the cement this summer. But I'm on the grill quite a bit, and
it's lovely grilling weather until the cool street.
Luckily, I can jump right into the pool or something afterwards. But we're pretty simple people. We like to cook at home and have a glass of wine and just relax.
Favorite sport other than football is?
Oh, baseball.
Baseball.
Yep. Yeah. I grew up playing baseball. I enjoy the college basketball game. Don't enjoy NBA as much, although I am a Celtics fan. But just baseball in general, I enjoy.
And you got to go to the Royals game for K-State Day, but you didn't get to stay for the game, did you? You came back.
I stayed for just a few innings because we had some official visits that day. So it was quick in and out.
One extra question. You a golfer?
Yep.
Handicap?
I will tell you, it's probably a 12, and sometimes I'll tell Mess he'll give me a couple extra strokes, but I can shoot anywhere from 78 to about 104. So golfing's a short season.
Golf. Yeah, especially up in North Dakota, you got beautiful courses, but
Yeah,
you only
it's
got
really
so many
short.
months you can
It's
use.
really short.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you sitting in with us here in the studio and talking about your arrival at K-State. It's been really good. And welcome again to Manhattan, Kansas.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the Sources Podcast. That has been the Chris Klieman Power Chat. I hope it gave you a little idea of what the Power Chat is like, and I got to be honest, there's a couple of them that I absolutely love this season. I liked them all. I enjoyed talking to everyone. But if you haven't seen the Eric Stone Street or the Joe Hall Power Chats, you probably need to subscribe. We will talk to you tomorrow with a questions podcast. The podcasts keep coming at GoPowerCat.com as essential listening for any Kansas State sports fan. I'm Tim Fitzgerald, and I'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to the PowerCat Sources Podcast presented by Blue Mark Energy. PowerCat Podcast. All rights reserved. GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street Publishing.